Shamangelic Healing Podcast is designed as a platform to share authentic conversations about real life issues, providing you with valuable resources and tools to support you in shining your most authentic self, creating a thriving life that you absolutely love, and to support you in manifesting your soul's mission. Welcome to this episode of the Shamangelic Healing Podcast. I am so honored and excited to share this guest with you, a dear friend, an amazing yoga teacher, Peter Sterios, who has been doing yoga for over 40 years, who has been teaching yoga for over 3 decades and doing teacher training for a decade and a half. This is such an honor. This beautiful powerhouse and moving force in the yoga movement has been at the White House doing yoga, is doing yoga for the Pentagon, and teaches yoga teachers all around the world. His book is coming out, Gravity and Grace, which you are absolutely going to love. That is the aspect of his story and about the yoga movement and his role and the power of yoga and the gravity and grace of yoga. And so that book is coming out soon, and we're excited about that. And also his DVD and also online courses are phenomenal, Gravity and Grace. We will make sure that we have all of the links in the show notes for also 30 free days of yoga with Peter Sterios. We're going to dive into the benefits of yoga that everybody can access from all stages, ages, and walks of life, all fitness levels, and so grateful to dive into this conversation. You are going to love it. Stay tuned for the whole thing because there's juicy pearls throughout this whole episode. Enjoy. So welcome to this episode of the Shamangelic Healing Podcast. I'm here with a dear friend of mine, Peter Sterios, who is a phenomenal yoga teacher. 4 decades that you have been doing yoga, 3 decades teaching yoga, and then teacher training as well. And I'm just so grateful that you are here to share with us, the benefits of yoga and how it can really be for everybody. And so grateful to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So tell us, you have had the benefit of doing yoga for this many years. So tell us, a little bit about what you've learned along the way and, demystify it for us, because yoga really is for everyone.
Yeah. The intro to yoga is so unique for every individual. In my case in particular, I would have been the last person you would have thought to approach something like yoga. Yeah. Growing up in a conservative family, a farm community in California, not exactly where you would expect to find someone with yoga inclinations. But at university, I saw it, and there was just something magical about what I was witnessing, and I was curious. Yeah. It's almost as if that curiosity was all that was needed to draw me, to bring situations, to bring me towards a yoga class. Yeah. And once I started, it was strictly athletic for me. Yeah. I was an athlete. It was something that was a physical challenge for me because I was so stiff and lots of injuries from sports. So for me, this was like, wow, I'm not very good at this,
Very humbling.
It is humbling for sure. But the benefits were evident immediately. From the first class, I felt different. Yeah. And each time I went back, there was a little more insight into what my limitations were.
Right, and we're talking about 4 decades ago, so the kind of yoga and the quality of yoga even then, very different than what is available today.
Oh, for sure. I mean, back in those days, there was really only one yoga. There was a yoga, physical movement, kind of standard postures, and it's evolved. Today there's thousands of styles of yoga and just thousands of shapes of poses. Right. So it really has evolved. In those days, literally you had to look, you had to really seek finding a class and a teacher. And I just stumbled into something.
Right. It's like that. Everybody's yoga story is like brought these synchronicities,
Yeah.
or somebody introduced, or I had to do it. And so tell us about the origins
Sure.
of yoga, because this is not just a trend, and this is not something really new.
Right.
So tell us about the ancient origins and the...
Sure. The current form of yoga, this physical yoga, they suspect was, I mean, no one really knows for sure because there wasn't a whole lot of things written down, between 7,000 and 10,000 years ago.
Wow.
So when you think about a fitness program that's 10,000 years old,
Right.
I would say it's pretty good chance it's
Right.
pretty good.
Well, yeah, so what is it? So let's demystify it a little bit about what the benefits are, because if it's lasted this long,
Yeah.
and that means there's really something for everybody in yoga, and there's lots of ways to go about it. There's lots of different benefits.
Yeah.
So what is something that is misunderstood a lot about yoga?
Well, just that very point that in this day and age, it isn't one yoga anymore.
Yeah.
There's so many different styles of yoga for so many subsets of, civilization, in terms of there's yoga for the elderly, there's yoga for the millennials, there's therapeutic yoga, there's hot yoga, there's power yoga, there's yin yoga. So really, depending on where you live or what your desire to do yoga is, let's say it's healing from an injury, you can find yoga classes now that are specific for people dealing with injuries.
Right.
If you don't have injuries and you just are, let's say, stiff or lack mobility, there are classes for increasing mobility. If you're weak, there's strength, power yoga classes that help build strength. So it really, it's a big array in the yoga market of what is out there, and to go to a yoga class, have a bad experience, it might not have been the yoga, it might have been that you found the wrong class.
Right.
That you need to look a little harder and find a class that's more suitable.
Right, and not every kind of yoga is going to fit you at
That's
different stages. If you're dealing with an injury, if you have back pain, if you have wrist challenges, or I love that there is yoga for post-traumatic stress syndrome, yoga for pregnant women, and I'm just so grateful that there has been such an evolution here, so that now there can be yoga for everybody. And we can eat. You said yoga for the elderly as well. We're here at this week is at the Sedona Yoga Festival, and we have the benefit of being in the presence of the oldest yoga teacher,
That's
who is
right.
100 years old,
Yes.
Tao. And so we can also see how yoga is for longevity, and that it's not just a young person's sport or lifestyle choice.
Exactly. She's amazing because when I look at her and listen to her talk and watch her move, for sure it's that movement. She's committed to a lifetime of exercise and movement. That's helped her immensely.
Yeah.
But when you listen to her and her humor and her joy, even her other pastime, which she doesn't mention much anymore, but she's a ballroom dancer.
Yeah.
And competed on, America's Got Talent or Britain's Got Talent. Like, this woman, she really walks her talk.
Right.
And it's the joy in her.
Right.
That has a huge impact on her longevity.
Well, and I think that that's one of the deeper benefits of yoga, is that it has the physical benefits, but if you're also working at the next level, which is more energetic and emotional, then we're doing the yoga where it's a lifestyle thing, it's a way of being, it's an outlook. So, so we have benefits in all these different areas. Let's go into the physical, and we'll go into all kind of 4 different areas. So what are some of the physical, just for people that have never done this before, that might be overweight or have anxiety or whatever it is, or stiffness, like you said, or a professional athlete? What are some of the just benefits just to the physical body of yoga?
The component that I stress the most in my classes is breathing. So most people, obviously, we learn how to breathe when we were born, but conscious breathing is what happens in yoga. It's different than, let's say, subconscious or unconscious breathing that we kind of fall into the habit of, because life is stressful, we don't even know we're holding our breath until we realize we're gasping, and then we sigh, or there's some kind of autonomic response in the body that says, it's time for you to breathe, otherwise you're going to pass out.
Right.
Okay? So what the yogis discovered is if you just consciously breathe, and what does that mean? It means primarily slowing your breath down. It isn't even about breathing deeply. It's about breathing slowly. And if you can even try it, those of you that are out there watching, listening, if you just string, say, 5 cycles of breath, breathing twice as slow as you normally breathe, notice the effect before and after. It's powerful. Almost no one cannot notice that difference. So on that basic level, learning how to breathe consciously is going to benefit circulation in the body. It's going to improve your cardiovascular health, surprisingly. It's not just about doing aerobics or going out for a run. Just by slowing your breath down, you're increasing the capacity of your lungs. Because there's these underutilized parts of your lungs that you don't access when you're shallow, short breathing. So that's basic. Beyond that, there's this obvious improvement in range of motion. So, through simple exercises, and I would have to add proper instruction, you can begin to notice in the first class a range of motion increase, or flexibility or strength increase. So for me, those are the 2 big pillars of why do yoga.
Right.
How do you access it, and how do you integrate it?
Yeah, on the physical level, there's so much there because our joints don't have circulation. And so if we aren't creating, like you said, mobility, if we're not actually moving the shoulders and the hips and the knees, they're not going to have circulation in there. And it kind of inhibits our ability to do the things we love, whether it's, going for a swim or a run or dancing, whatever it is in life that requires physiology, making wonderful, passionate love, all of these things, playing with your kids, running on the field, taking a hike, all of those things require that certain level of mobility in the knees and the joints and the hips. And I think that one of the things that you're addressing is mobility and circulation comes from moving those joints.
That's exactly right.
And especially if we have repetitive movements in our everyday life, if we're constantly sitting, or if you're a clerk with a checkout where there's a kind of repetitive movements, or sitting in front of the computer that is kind of keeping circulation or a contraction in the body, the opportunity for yoga to just breathe and expand and do counter stretches to sitting in a car if you're a truck driver, or sitting at a desk, or leaning in life in such a way that kind of creates stagnancy or like contraction, that yoga gives us the opportunity to counter stretch there.
Yeah, and it can be really simple things. A lot of people approach yoga thinking it's all about stretching. And stretching to me is misunderstood. And modern science, having just written this book, the research that I uncovered, modern science is discovering that our bodies aren't structured the way we were taught. This idea of bones, joints, and muscles is inadequate to fully describe how the body moves. When you think about stretching a muscle, there's an insertion point and an origin point. And there's this kind of idea that, okay, we're stretching in a 2-dimensional line. However, what science is showing is that our bodies are a web of connective tissue. The muscles play a part in it, but really it's the connective tissue that provides the basic structure of the body. And our bones, our joints, even our organs are interspersed in this web of connective tissue. And what they recently discovered is that not only does the connective tissue wrap organs, muscles, and joints, they penetrate them. So when you think about connective tissue penetrating a muscle, it kind of the idea that a muscle stretches in one dimension is wrong. And the term that the scientists are using is, they call it multifractal. So that means that this connective tissue that's going through a muscle isn't logical in its direction or orientation. It's chaos. It's different directions, no patterns. And so I came across this word when I was injured. I had a back injury, that if I focused less on stretching and more on softening, when you think about the word softening, it's three-dimensional. And that idea that softening can really address the anatomical structure that we are, because we can move subtly in 3 dimensions. Because when you think about it, what do you feel when you soften something?
Yeah,
Space. Yeah, and space is multidimensional. So for me, that's something that this is where we transition from the purely physical exercise into these more subtle things that, and ironically, they found that connective tissue is unique in that it can store emotional stress.
Right.
So it's like what is called a flywheel. It stores that stress, and through yoga practice, we release that stress in the connective tissue. And it saves you a lot of money in psychotherapy.
Well, because, the traumas that are held in the emotional body, when we get to exhale again and again and again, we're actually getting to unwind from traumas, whether it was a physical or emotional trauma from the past, whether it's just been consecutive anxiety that has never had a chance to exhale. And maybe you've just been really holding your breath in fear that the thing's going to happen again. Someone's going to break my heart again. Someone's going to leave me again. Someone's going to, judge me again. And that emotional, energetic trauma, when you're breathing, we get to come back to center again. And one of the things that I think is fascinating about the breathing and the relaxing and the space that you talked about is that the parasympathetic nervous system gets to come on board, which is where the body's divine intelligence for healing itself gets turned on. And we're not in fight or flight. We're in this safe space where we get to breathe, we get to exhale, we get to be held, and we get to recenter. And I think that's where yoga affects the energy body, where we counter the effects of stress and trauma and emotional, holding.
Yeah, grip.
And kind of holding back our emotions, to try to hold it all together, where yoga in the breathing and in the spaciousness that you're talking about through the postures and through the breath gives the opportunity to just let it go.
Yeah, this conversation is so timely because intuitively I was experiencing these things in the early days of my practice, but I really didn't understand what I was feeling.
Yeah.
And writing the book, I uncovered all this modern research as 2015 was when some of this research was done, where they're studying how mindfulness works. And ultimately, this idea of the parasympathetic, what is the most efficient stimulant to get into that parasympathetic? It's the vagus nerve in the body. What is the number one most effective technique for getting that vagus nerve activated? This is interesting to me. Slow breathing. Not deep breathing, not Kundalini breathing, just slow breathing. So that's such a simple technique.
Right. So really, everybody can do this.
Oh, everyone.
Because what you're talking about with the breathing is the pranayama arm of yoga, which isn't so much about the postures, and it's more just about, which is the asana. The asanas is the postures, and the pranayama is this whole limb of yoga, which is just breathing, just breath.
Conscious breathing.
Conscious breathing.
Yeah,
Thank
yeah.
you. Thank you for that.
Yeah, prana meaning life force and yama integration. It's a Sanskrit word, but really in simple English, it's just slow conscious breathing.
Right.
And then there's different techniques. You can create different psychological effects, but most beginners, I teach pranayama the very first class.
Good.
And I don't even mention the word.
Yeah.
It's only the students that come back later and they say, hey, I feel really different from class. What were you doing? And I say, oh, it's this little thing called pranayama. And if you want to know more about it, keep coming to class, or here's a book.
Right. So this is where it can be accessible to everybody. My kids that are in college that are dealing with the stress of midterms, it's like breathing. Yeah. And, our soldiers that are coming back from war or that are dealing with intense traumas, it's like breathing.
Yeah.
You know, anyone that, you know, parents that are dealing with the overwhelm of juggling kids and you know, family responsibilities and two jobs and a household and all of that, it's like breathing. You know?
Conscious breathing.
Conscious
Yeah.
breathing.
That's really the
slow
key.
breathing.
Yeah.
So that really is what makes it accessible.
It does.
To everybody. And if you said that activating the vagus nerve, now we get into parasympathetic nervous system, so that people that are going through disease and cancers and heart problems and high blood pressure, now that is something that anybody can do from the comfort of their own home, is slow breathing to kind of accelerate whatever healing they're going through, as far as activating their body's own healing intelligence if they're dealing with some physical ailment.
Exactly. This window opened up for me when I injured my back.
Yeah.
So I herniated a disc in my back that was severe, was recommended surgery. That something intuitive said, no, I don't know if surgery is the right thing for me. And because I was bedridden literally for 2 weeks, actually I was floor ridden, because my bedroom was upstairs and I couldn't go up the stairs. My back pain was so bad. And what I noticed is on the inhalation of my breath, the pain in my lower back would spike a little bit. And so obviously there was some anxiety around breathing deep. But if I breathed slow, I could manage that intensity. And even though I didn't get a full breath, I could breathe adequately. What I did notice though on the exhale is a complete absence of pain. And through like a couple days of this, I started to think, the brain was still working. What if I just start extending the length of my exhales? I didn't know that much about pranayama. So I would breathe a 3 to 4 second inhale and an 8 to 10 second exhale. And it was working. It was just like for 8 to 10 seconds, every cycle of breath, I was completely out of pain. So over the course of 2.5 weeks, I was breathing 15-second inhales slowly and 60-second exhales. So that's 1/4 of my time I was in subtle pain, and 3/4 of my time I was completely pain-free. And I do think that this helped the healing, because for that 3/4 amount of time, I was anxiety-free. My parasympathetic nervous system was releasing subconscious grip around all my organs, my lungs. It just was like a blanket of relaxation.
Well, and that also, when the brain is in that state, it releases different chemicals in the body.
That's exactly right.
Versus when it's in pain and anxiety and stress, it is going to release endorphins and all kinds of stress chemicals. Cortisol levels will change. Adrenaline goes up, which is not the healing environment.
That's
for pain.
exactly it.
Oh, wonderful! I really appreciate that you taking the time to kind of break that out, because now anybody that is in pain for any reason. And I don't know anybody that really isn't in some, chronic pain in some area from an injury or, non-circulation or a surgery or anything like that. Or posture challenges or a car accident or whatever. Okay.
And I would add that it works incrementally. I didn't go from 3-second inhale to 15 like that, or I didn't go from a 10-second exhale to a 60-second exhale just like that. I added maybe 1 second a day, and I just gradually built up.
And when you're actually doing those slow breathing exercises in a posture, what is really exciting about that is that with the hip flexor being tight, when you're doing that slow breathing, all of the micro stretches get into the vascular, the tissues, the connective tissues that maybe aren't able to be stretched otherwise, or circulated or expanded otherwise. And so it's not just the posture that your body is in the yoga, but doing those conscious breathing, I find that's where I get those micro stretches where I'm stretching from the inside out. And it's not just the meaty tissue, but it's the cartilage, all of the connective tissue, the organs are getting this breathing that is giving it space and circulation, where I'm just in my everyday habitual postures, there's no way it's getting in there otherwise.
And I'm listening to you talk, and I'm going to just offer you a little suggestion.
Please.
when I change my vocabulary, teaching and also subvocal vocabulary from stretch to soften, I don't use the word stretch in my yoga classes.
Oh, good.
Yeah, are you coming later
Yes,
today?
yes, I'm coming today.
So you'll have that
I
experience.
promise, yes.
So what happens when we change that subvocal dialogue? Going to yoga isn't about stretching. It's about softening and creating space. The body knows what to do when you create that space. So can you support your body's inner wisdom to find its space, to allow its natural healing forces to move? And the mind just kind of is in a witness place now.
Yeah.
It's not really directing the show. What's directing the show actually is the heart.
Yes.
And this is another beautiful thing about what yoga starts to develop, hopefully, as you move through your practices, is you rely less on doing and more with just being in that sacred space of relaxation.
Well, now we're really talking about why this practice is 9,000, 10,000 years old, is because the yogis found that when you're in that deeper state of oneness, beyond the breathing, beyond the postures, and now we're getting into the space of yoga, which is the union and yoking of like gross self, physical self, to higher self, expanded self, one self, universal self. That's where I think there's so much more to go into with the yoga beyond just the physicality, and this is where it gets real. This is the next level, the next levels, and the next benefits of yoga are coming into that oneness, because that's where we really get to connect with our true essence, our true power, divine wisdom. And so speak a little bit about that, because that's where it really gets juicy.
Well, everything you just said, it was like me talking to myself. Okay, so, but the way to tell if it's working, because we go, oh, that's a big step from thinking about myself, healing, and then merging with the universal spirit. Yeah. So look at the relationships in your life. Okay. If it's working within yourself, those special people that are dear to you in your life have that magical power to give you some tests.
Yes.
And if in your experience through just ups and downs of life with these people dear to you in your life, if you're finding you're contracting, I'd say you got to spend a little more time in that yoga practice.
Because that gives us the opportunity to practice off the mat.
That's right.
That says, well, am I constricting my breathing because this person is triggering me right now?
Right.
I'm feeling judged or attacked, or I'm going into my own inner dialogue of the inner critic, or unworthiness, or guilt, or shame. And that's, to me, where the real yoga is. Can I soften?
Yeah.
Can I breathe into this experience? Can I not judge it and contract? And can I feel into what is the posture that I can embody to respond to this with grace and not judgment or reaction or criticism? How can I come into that compassion? And I think this is where yoga helps us to bridge into those higher states of human frequencies of compassion, forgiveness, and love and patience and
all those things.
Yeah.
You asked earlier, what's most misunderstood about yoga. And I want to add something with this conversation because a lot of people think there's something magic in the pose. And they look at these shapes in pictures or videos and they think this is the shape that I'm after. But no, there's a lead up to that pose that every unique body, every unique personality has obstacles to address. And yoga, the pose, your pose is going to look totally different than someone else's pose. And ultimately, if you advance in yoga, there really is never an end to a pose. Where you are in the moment, can you, just like you were describing relationships, that relationship with yourself, when you meet a part of yourself inside that triggers you, that was the injury I had in high school, or that was this, or I'm even something that's genetic, I've got limited mobility because one bone is shorter than the other, whatever it is. There's a physical component and a psychological component to what you're experiencing. That's where yoga comes in, that moment. How do we address, or at least observe, how much of what I'm feeling is psychological, how much of I'm feeling is the physical limitation. in my own experience, I would say almost 70-80% of what you're experiencing is the psychological grip. So just this process of softening gives you access to some of that psychological grip, and you can free a lot of it. What happens when you free the grip? This is important. So you're in a pose. It's a generally static pose, let's say, and you create this space. What then? The pose isn't done, because if you just create space and let your muscles go soft, gravity is not your friend in that moment, okay?
Yeah, you fall over.
You're gonna fall. So what yogis discovered, and the word Hatha yoga, which almost all yoga that we do physically its roots is Hatha yoga. The word Hatha, many definitions, but the primary one for me is simultaneous effort and non-effort. So in the non-effort, where you surrender, where you soften and create this space, there's a simultaneous effort. And what is that effort? This is where grace, you use that word grace. Grace comes in form of intuition. And intuition creates this desire to move into that space that you've created. And it's difficult for a yoga teacher to cue that. The one cue that I do use is almost every pose has an element of extension or elongation in the spine. So that the spine is this central conduit, and it kind of carries the life force energy in our bodies. It should never be in a collapsed place. But a lot of yoga overemphasizes muscular effort to create that extension. It's very simple. Just extend the back of the skull up and release the tailbone. And those are things that I cue in a class, but there's infinite number of shapes, infinite number of movements, and your intuition in that moment of surrender is your guide. It brings an intuitive response. And that's what my classes are about. That's what I teach.
And I love that the name of the classes is Gravity and Grace, because these are these forces of gravity in life, challenges, stress, overwhelm, physical pain, fear, doubt, insecurity, wounds, the gravity, and then from that comes the grace or the levity that can be defied by embodiment, by presence, by witnessing, by softening, by awareness. And I just love that this is where yoga can go as beyond just physical therapy for the physical body, but emotional, energetic, spiritual, mental therapy for the whole aspect of who we are.
It's the bonus.
I know.
We start yoga with this idea that we're going to heal something physical.
Yeah.
And then it kind of sneaks up on you. and I don't pre-digest that for my students. I plant little seeds and give them clues and let them kind of experience it on their own. So I use these terms gravity and grace a lot. And gravity, simple definition, attraction of bodies, but it can also be a body of thought or whatever. And grace is this attraction, but it's operating on a non-physical level. It's operating on like a spiritual level or artistic level. And it wasn't until just recently that I started using this word levity, because to me, grace is this intuitive response when surrender is present. It kind of enters with an intelligence that guides you into movement. As you move, it creates a feeling like bliss. It's like this, it's just that.
There is a physical thing in the brain that is released when we actually get into that place. And this is one of the things that, the yogis talk about, the Amrita, which is like the divine nectar.
Totally.
When you're in that zone, really where all of the bodies are aligned and connected, and all of our chakras are really kind of stacked, opened, and integrated. And the spine is open, and our fullness, we're that conduit. This physical, chemical, energetic, spiritual feeling comes into the body, and that Amrita, that divine nectar, gets to be tasted. And I think that's why it has lasted so long, is that we don't necessarily need to go outside ourselves for bliss, or from another person, or constantly seeking stimulation or entertainment, when we can also be able to sip from the cup of divine blissful nectar at any time within our own control, at any place for free.
Exactly. So all these words, in the early days, first say 20 years of my yoga education, these words were concepts.
Yeah.
And I actually had some resistance to the Sanskrit terms. And I wanted my teachers to just tell me in plain English.
Yeah,
And
it's a
really,
feeling.
levity was that word that kind of came to me, and it just provided this understanding in simple language. And the beautiful thing about that word levity is it operates both on the physical and the psychological.
Yeah.
So the physical definition of levity is obviously just lightness, this buoyancy that creates lightness. On the psychological level, it's lightness of heart and humor. And so I integrate a lot of humor into my classes.
Of course.
And it's conscious. And I joke, I said I introduced humor, and when that's not working, I introduce bad humor. and that works too, So the idea is to create that psychological and physical levity through this simple practice of yoga. And it's not about the shape, that final shape, it's about staying present with breath and this intuitive response to softness. Yeah. And it produces levity.
Right? And actually gives us that gateway to experience higher states of emotional joy and happiness, and especially when we're dealing with a challenge, that yoga can be that bridge to kind of move us out of depression or anxiety or unworthiness and bridge us into those higher states of gratitude and grace and joy and peace, which are higher emotional frequencies for all of us to be able to access. There's anybody that doesn't have access to that.
Yeah.
And,
so when we talk about these subtle sensations in our body that these emotional thoughts create, for years I understood how the body has these channels, like in meridians in acupuncture and nadis in yoga. I'd never really understood how to activate them. And there were the three primary channels, the main channel, this Sushumna channel. For years, I would hear this Sanskrit term, and I never really took the time to find the Sanskrit translation of it until I started writing my book. And I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but do you know what the simple translation of Sushumna is?
Sushumna. I know where it's located, but I don't know the simple translation.
Isn't that interesting? That was me, and I'd say 90% of yoga teachers.
Well, and it's not like you've been doing this a long time.
No,
so
I know.
This is
so
real valuable.
It's kindness.
No.
Yeah.
Wow.
So kindness. When you think about embodying kindness, you get that tingle right up your spine.
Wow. And it does kind of lengthen.
Yeah.
Right. And it opens the chest because kindness is coming from the heart space.
Yeah. Well, the opening the chest is another thing too that I don't know if this is the form to talk about it, but we as yoga teachers, we have kind of inherited this idea that to open the heart, it creates a physical posture like this. And when you think about this physical posture, I'm going to talk about this in class today, that's why it's on my mind. When you think about this posture of opening the heart, is it physically opening the heart? Energetically, maybe, but physically, when you think about it, the rib cage is attached to the sternum. This joint where the ribs and the sternum meet is pretty immobile. It's not a highly
Flexible,
mobile. Yeah, but the thoracic spine moves a lot, right? So if we're trying to create an open heart physically and psychologically like this, and our thoracic vertebrae are pressing the heart against the sternum bone, the heart is getting squeezed. And this may challenge you in class today if you're coming. I coach drop the chest, soften into the chest. And another image, when you think about sharing intimate space with a partner, and you want to meet them open-hearted, if you come at your partner like this, which is like the way guys hug, come baby, come in for a hug. No. But then when you create that cradle in that heart space to receive another.
Right.
And so in a way, my yoga classes, the way I cue them, is I'm getting people into that heart space to receive.
That's the feeling body.
Yeah.
And I guess we said earlier, there's many different yoga teachers and many different ways of teaching yoga. And what I'm hearing you say is that you're teaching yoga from the inside out.
Totally.
Where you get to embody the posture from a sense of feeling, whether that's a posture that is embodying softness or space, or whether it's a posture that is embodying confidence or like mountain or warrior, but still to be able to meet that with a softness, so that you can embody it not from a place of force or inauthenticity or effort, but from a place of softening in and then allowing it to birth.
Exactly.
Oh, beautiful.
That word Hatha has so much meaning in it when you really dissect it. And it's not just non-effort.
Yeah.
It's not just creating the space and feeling the bliss. It's the response that bliss creates for you.
Yeah.
So without talking about this class, I don't want to pre-digest it for you, but my classes are strong. You know,
Yes.
it's not just about rolling around on bolsters.
Yeah, right.
So it's that simultaneous creation of softness, space, and then intuitive movement.
Well, and those are the best classes, because I want to really be stretched, not physically. And I'm using that stretch because I want my new normal to be stretched.
Yeah.
I want it to be shifted. I want it to be expanded when I go to a class.
That's the word, expand.
I want it to shift.
Yeah.
And I ask a lot of classes. I've been doing yoga for decades, and I'm a bit of a yoga snob.
I hope I don't disappoint.
Oh, you won't. I know, because you're talking right in alignment with what I would want. Is that I want my yoga class and my yoga experience when I go to another to teach me, to help me access those places within me, physically, emotionally, energetically, mentally, and spiritually, that I'm tripping over or having a struggle with accessing. And that's to me what a yoga teacher really is helping me bridge into those subtle places, not just in the physical places, but in that place of me that allows myself to expand.
Yeah.
And all of it, so that I can be a fuller, more aligned, more radiant, authentic, higher vibrational being, which is, we're all craving growth and expansion. We're all craving that. We don't want to be stuck in this place of stagnancy. We have a human need for expansion and growth. And so, tips time.
Yes, sure.
Tips time. So for people that are beginning, or that are like have had a fear maybe of trying it, they've heard all of this hype about yoga and everybody's talking about it, but they haven't yet really moved into that, what would be your tips for a beginner?
Well, there's home practice, and then there's go to class.
Yeah.
And home practice, if you're a raw beginner, you can, if you find the right instructional guides, I think you can do simple things at home, but you'll quickly reach a point where there'll be questions and the book or the podcast doesn't give you the answer.
Yeah.
So you have to seek out a teacher. How do you do that? Traditionally, it's been a karmic influence, essentially. If you just set an intention or set some kind of desire or wish to find the right teacher, the teacher shows up.
Yeah.
So one of the quotes in my book is, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. When the student's really ready, the teacher disappears. Right? So that initial thing is you just set that intention. Maybe it's this podcast. Maybe it's just having that inspiration, just what this generates says, okay, I'm going to commit to yoga. In my community, I'm going to try and find a live person. Right. And how do I find that? We start having communication with people that you know about yoga in your communities. That's my guidance.
You know, yoga is happening in community centers. It's happening in schools. It's happening in fitness gyms. It's happening in yoga studios. Right. It's actually happening in offices now. And so I think it's wonderful to just get out there and try. And I suggest with my clients to sit when they're just exploring yoga, I'm like, look, go to a yoga class or call them on the phone, call the yoga center and say, look, this is my weight, this is my physical ability, this is my experience, these are my fears, these are my challenges. What class do you think would be best for me?
Awesome.
And actually be humble enough to ask for help and guidance, so that it's less of throwing a dart in the dark.
Exactly.
And then go try it with an open mind, because you might like the class but not the teacher. You might like the teacher but not the location, and so like just giving yourself permission to try 5 or 6 different classes with an open mind to find what fits for you.
Sure. It seems like with people under the age of 25 that connection can be also facilitated online, to seek out, videos on YouTube or, whatever connection you have through digital media. And with that in mind, I did create some classes that are digital, that are on a website, yogaanytime.com, and I have a whole season meant just for beginners.
Oh, wonderful.
So there are resources, if you're inspired by this talk, where you can go to yogaanytime.com and find my classes and experience it. And then if you connect with what you see digitally, I highly recommend presence, because, and this is a personal thing with us, for years I've just seen you from afar. This is the first time I've sat down and had an amazing conversation with you, and your presence is inspiring. This conversation is inspiring. And this presence thing is the gift. It's hard to get that online.
Yeah, that is really valuable, to have the flexibility to be able to take your yoga practice with you and have it on the go, with an online course that you love, or a video that you pop in or whatever. And my best acceleration has happened when I've had a yoga teacher hold me accountable.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite yoga teachers, he was watching my acceleration, and he goes, "Hey, do you really want to accelerate?" And I said, "Oh, bait, took the hook." He goes, "Well, show me your favorite 3 postures." And of course, those would be the ones that I have accelerated, that I'm good at, that are easier for me. And I'm like, "Yeah, I got these." And he goes, "You really want to accelerate?" I'm like, "Yep, yeah, oh yeah, hook." And he says, "What are your least favorite?" I'm like, Hanama, that splits one, that frog one, where my inner thigh, like that one hurts, that one sucks, I don't like that one. If I could never do those again, I would be a happy yogi. And he goes, "Here's the challenge. You can't do those 3 favorite ones, and you have to do your least 3 favorite postures for the whole next month." And I'm like, I hate you now. And, this is where the presence of a yoga teacher, to be able to call you out, to be able to encourage you, and also see the blind spots in your yoga practice and help make adjustments to where you need to go and where you're avoiding. And a coach, a teacher, that's, I think, the real role of somebody in that. For somebody, is to help you accelerate.
I would say you got a great teacher there, and my teacher said the same thing to me.
Yes, I know. And this is where the true yoga is. Yeah. I believe one of the places where the real yoga is am I willing to go look at and do those postures in life, not just in yoga, that I'm uncomfortable with. And that's where I think the yoga on the mat translates to the yoga off the mat.
Exactly.
Is, can I do those things, have those conversations, make those choices that are difficult and uncomfortable, those postures in life that I want to truly avoid, that are keeping me from growing.
Yeah. We live in a time where we have to confront that daily.
Yeah.
And to just turn off the news and not pay attention, that isn't the answer.
Right.
You need to control it, but you really have these huge opportunities right now. Where can I apply myself, create space, and help people, serve people?
Right. And avoiding who we are, avoiding dealing with our fears of being seen or whatever it is keeping, the best version of each of us out in our communities, in our families, in our relationships, and leading. Okay, so another round of tips. What are some tips for people that are injured? Because people might have been professional, like athletes, and now are just in this place of, well, now that my knee isn't good anymore, I have a bad hip or my shoulder. What are some tips that you have about yoga for injuries?
The yoga for injuries is a topic dear to my heart, because that was kind of the prerequisite for me entering yoga fully. Yeah. I dabbled for 5 years then I was playing semi-professional rugby. Great pastime.
See you as a
Yeah.
as a
Well, I
rugby.
weighed like 30 pounds more and lifting weight, you know. But it was a great prerequisite for doing yoga because I had a lot of material to work with, okay, all these injuries. And I learned that if I just did standard class yoga, it helped a little bit, but I was always at risk of re-injuring myself. So if you're working with those kind of acute or even chronic imbalances, it really requires a heightened level of attention. And let's say you get hurt in a class, your favorite teacher, your favorite class, you get hurt. Is it a good idea to keep going back to that same class and that same teacher? I would question it because no one should be getting hurt in yoga. There's something off. And there was a study recently by Columbia Medical School 5-7 years ago, I can't remember the exact date, where the most common source of injury is repetition. Overuse. The second was lack of proper instruction. So these are powerful things. In the current era of yoga, the successful yoga teachers aren't necessarily the ones with the most experience. They're the ones with the most popularity and charisma, typically. So how do we enter an environment of yoga where the popular classes, where everyone wants to be seen and felt, are actually inexperienced teachers that have been teaching less than 20 years? I don't know if there's a solution in the short term other than to be really careful in the classes. And you can hear for clues if the language of the teacher that you're studying with or the class you're in is guiding you towards some prescription of how to do things handed down by a master teacher. That would be a little flag. It's more important to be hearing things like, are cues taking you inward to your own inner teacher? Are they supporting your own journey into your own space of intuition, where that true source of what's right and wrong really rests? Self-evident truths rest here. Is the guidance in the class, is the personality of the teacher guiding you there? And if they are, then I'd say that's a great environment.
Because that gives you the freedom to rest, that gives you the freedom to adjust the posture and not let the ego say, well, I have to do like everybody else and I have to do it in the time of everybody else. And if this is hurting my wrist, well, I just have to push through it, rather than listening to, no, I make this adjustment because of my wrist. Or when it's getting too intense, I have the freedom to back down and not allow the ego to hurt me or injure me in this situation. So I think that's with yoga, with injuries that are happening within yoga. And then for people that are dealing, like you said, with a back injury or a repetitive use injury, or they blew out their knee or something like that, how can yoga help in those therapeutic situations?
It's all about circulation. So if there's surgical intervention to fix a knee or fix a shoulder, fix a back, that surgical intervention creates an obstacle. The scar tissue is an obstacle for circulation and movement. So how do we address scar tissue? Very slowly. So if you're working with those conditions, I often tell people, move half the distance in twice the time.
Oh, that's a good one, Peter.
Yeah, half the distance in twice the time. And when enough is enough, that's it for today.
Right. And this is where we get to expand the compassion and the gentleness and the softening that you were talking about earlier, so that it actually can allow itself to heal. Because if we're trying to push an injury and force healing, then we're actually just not allowing the scar tissue to heal.
That's right.
And now it becomes chronic pain and it becomes a chronic injury. And that doesn't ever heal because there wasn't that grace, there wasn't that space, there wasn't that patience.
Right.
To actually move it slower, and to let the ego stand down and be on the bench a little while.
Totally.
And rest, because that's maybe why it got injured in the first place.
Yeah, you don't want to say that, because that brings up another issue, though, because there's this attachment to the way things used to be.
Right.
And it took me almost 14 months to heal my herniated disc in my back.
Yeah.
How many people have 14 months to wait to heal.
Right.
I don't know that many. It takes a special kind of person. And I think all of us have that potential, but we've been sold something different.
Yeah, but what's the downside is that you don't do it, then you have that disc, injury for 10, 20, 30, 50, for your whole life.
Yeah.
That is kind of keeping you from fully enjoying skiing or dancing or lovemaking or whatever it is. And I've seen your videos, I've been in your class before, and you don't have any slip disc. You are able to, you can feel how the yoga in your body is. I can see how your body's responding to the care that you've given.
Thank you.
And it's not just because you were born this way. You've had injuries, you've had traumas. It's not like, oh well, everybody this person can just do the splits. It's like no.
I tell this story
It's
a lot.
work.
When my first yoga class, touching my kneecaps, bending forward, standing, that was a good day. I touched my kneecaps. I was so muscular and bound and tight and yeah.
Right, and I think that especially for athletes, it's really valuable because it helps you actually improve your the circulation in the muscles that you're asking to perform.
Exactly.
And I remember when I was doing triathlons, and I was running and cycling a lot more, that my legs were just getting tighter and tighter and tighter. I'm like, yoga becomes what I have to do.
It's cross training.
It's cross training, exactly.
Yeah,
okay, so a few more tips.
Sure.
What would you say to those people that have found yoga and now are just not really being consistent with it?
Right.
Where they've done yoga before, it's have helped them, they've enjoyed it, or they haven't taken it to that deeper level. So
I think even if I look at the path that I had, there's always plateaus where progress seems to stagnate or even drop if you get injured. And those are moments when a lot of people get depressed and either quit or take up Pilates, they just kind of find something else. However, those are the special times. And in yesterday's class, I asked people, because it was a restorative class, about injuries, and the people that volunteered, I asked each one of them, was your injury a gift? And only one person said, yeah, it was a gift. The rest of them were still seeing it as a limitation. Yeah. And my experience with my injuries is that they are gifts. It made me focus. Yeah. It made me get present in that specific place in my body. And how do I address that? And it took me years to uncover how to address it, how to make my attention and breath meet in a knee, literally. How to, like lower back, how to make my breath and attention meet me in my lower back. And this was powerful realization. This is what the ancient yogis understood. And finding language for, to use the Sanskrit terms, it may be not useful because you don't subvocalize in Sanskrit. You subvocalize in English. So if you're an English speaker, how do you create language in your own tongue to subvocalize how to be present here or here? And that is the key to healing.
And so for those people that are going in those waves with plateaus of, I was into yoga and now I'm not, and maybe not from an injury, just from life gets busy and they get distracted. And so you've been through those waves before, I've been through those waves before, I'm going through another wave of that before, like knowing that it's beneficial and being consistent. So what advice would you say about getting back on that?
Little bits. Like I used to have this mindset that I wasn't going to practice if I couldn't practice for 90 minutes. Well, busy, parenthood, the whole gamut. I have 3 or 4 poses that I do daily.
Okay, what are those? This is juice, people, right here.
Yeah.
For those of us that are busy and don't have a lot of time for yoga and our excuses, I don't have time, what are your top 3 postures to do every day?
So every class I teach and every pose first thing out of bed in the morning is child's pose.
Oh, nice.
Now, it's not child's pose with the knees apart, which puts me to sleep. it's child's pose with the knees together, which creates a confrontation with the way we habitually breathe. Most of us breathe either in the chest or the belly. And even in yoga classes, you're taught, breathe into the chest, breathe into the belly. But there's a component of breathing that is rarely taught, and access for me is the most powerful, is the back body. Breathing into the back of the heart, the back of the belly, the back of the pelvis. Nice. Why is that so important? Because that's where all the subtle channels of the yogic system operate. I mean, there are a few things up here, but everything's back there.
Spine, yeah.
And if you're lifting the chest and breathing up, all the musculature of the back is in contraction. And to access the subtle energy that moves along the spine, it's choked from that. So child's pose, knees together, creates that access to a beautiful open round back, and a temporary, I call it temporary inconvenience of not being able to breathe fully into the front. And for those of you that are dealing with hip mobility issues, or even you're a large bone person that it's not easy to fold onto your legs, you prop yourself. You bring your arms forward, you rest, or you whatever you need to be in that position where you get a little bit of compression. The reason that that's useful for people with back injuries is because it creates a subtle expansion of the spine, extension.
And circulation.
And circulation.
Okay, so the first one's child pose.
Yeah. Second one is this pose that it's a side bending pose, where I put my hands on my waist and I just side bend side to
lateral
side.
for the spine, yeah.
There's marma points, circulation points that are right here on the top of the hip bones with the hands at the waist and going side bending, that create stimulation for the water element in the body, which is circulation and flow.
Blood flow,
Yeah. So that's also very useful. And the last one is downward facing dog pose. Yeah. And the thing I love about downward facing dog pose is that it's a compound, what I call a compound pose. It's an inversion, it's a hamstring stretch, it's a shoulder strengthener, it's a spine extender. Right. So it's just like it in a short amount of time.
Right.
And that practice for me is 15 minutes.
Yeah.
That's it. And I do usually try to end in a seated meditation. And even if it's just a minute or two of conscious breathing, 5 cycles of breath, slow breathing, we're good.
Right? It's going to shift the way you engage the day, for sure.
Totally.
In all ways. And I love that circulation into the spine. I like to do twists. I like to do flexion and lateral movements to the spine, because I had heard that a healthy spine is a healthy body, and longevity. And if you're getting that circulation through all of the spine, then it's also sending the nerve endings and the circulation to all of the organs as well. So that getting flexion and lateral and twisting in the spine is a great way to start the day.
Thank you.
Okay, so what is, you have done yoga in the White House, and you have had decades of teaching other yoga teachers. And what is just one thing that has really changed your life, or a person or something like that, where you were really impacted about where yoga is going?
Right.
Or where it has touched you?
Going to the White House touched me deeply. I remember at the end of the first year sitting, it was an annual event, sitting on the White House South Lawn, and all the guests had left, and there was 12 teachers, and here we were at the pinnacle of American politics and culture, and we had just taught yoga.
Yes.
And it was like, wow, there's hope. Yeah. There's hope. And that was a really powerful time for me. And just recently invited to the Pentagon to talk to these leaders, in a way, of how to integrate the therapeutic benefits of yoga for soldiers returning from war, PTSD, etc. And the fact that they're that is an amazing story in itself. I was teaching a retreat in Nicaragua, and 2 lieutenant colonel officers in the Marine Corps were in my retreat, both women. And at the end of the retreat, they said, "We need you to come." And they arranged it. And so there I was. And starting next year, I'm going to be doing a training in North Carolina at the Marine base there for officers.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
Oh,
so
it's so good to hear, Peter. It's
yeah,
so good to hear.
it's just like, okay, how is this happening?
Right.
This isn't me with a marketing plan going, hey, I'm going to go teach the Marine
Right.
Corps. This is just life unfolding.
Right.
So
And it's going into schools. Yoga is going into
prisons,
prisons.
yeah.
And you and I both know teachers that are going and doing regular prison yoga with inmates. And it's wonderful to see that it's moving into the military and it's moving into politics and into the White House and into the leaders of our country.
Yeah, it's encouraging,
That's
inspiring.
So, it is. And you have been doing teacher training now for how many years? Just teacher training?
Well, the teacher training has evolved for me. I was doing teacher trainings before I should have been doing teacher trainings. And, you know, in some ways, it's all good. We all find where we're supposed to be. But for the last 12 years, I've been teaching what I'm teaching now.
Right.
And I don't have big trainings. I purposely limit them to 15 people.
Yeah.
So
All around the world, you do those.
All around the world.
Yeah.
And what I find with the number 15 is a level of presence and intimacy with every student that you don't find in corporate trainings.
Nice.
So, yeah, that to me has been, it isn't about the money. It really is about an exchange. Like when I show up for 15 people, they show up for me.
Yeah.
And yes, I need money to support a life and a family, but it's the exchange face to face with people that feeds something deeper for me.
And this is what I respect about you is your level of integrity and impeccability with yoga, with the practice, with your teaching, and also with your teacher training, and the willingness to really go deep with authentic teachings. And so I'm so grateful
Me too.
for over 4 decades of doing yoga and over 3 decades of teaching yoga, 2 decades of, or a decade plus of teacher training. You have been a phenomenal influence in the yoga movement. You really have. And I'm excited about your book coming out. And so tell people about what's happening with you and what you can give the audience. We want to give you something today.
Yes.
So tell them a little bit about what's happening and where they can find you.
Sure. My website is levityyoga.com. That's one Y with a lowercase o. And this book is part memoir, part technique, and a lot of science, where I found research to back up these concepts of yoga, and I describe it in simple language. It is published by Sounds True. It's available for pre-sale now on Amazon. It will be available for pre-sale at Sounds True and my website, Levity Yoga, in April. I also have online classes that are available, as I mentioned earlier, at yogaanytime.com. And you can go on that website and enter my last name, Sterios, and receive 30 days of free classes, which I have 3 seasons of classes, about 35 classes on that. I also have some DVDs that are available, and this is Yoga for Longevity, which is highly recommended for people new to yoga. And for those of you that have been doing yoga for a while and are looking for inspiration, maybe you're a teacher and looking for inspiration, this is my first DVD, which is what Anahata was talking about. She's practiced from. And the encouragement with this DVD is there's a lot of educational content here that you can just watch, and there's lectures that I give that you can study from. And obviously the encouragement to only do what you're capable of doing and leave the rest for another day. So that's how you find me.
So grateful. This is wonderful. We'll make sure in the show notes on the landing page that you can get access to that free 30 days. That is a wonderful gift. And I'm so excited about Gravity and Grace, your book coming out. I'm excited to read that and dive into the stories there. And also for all of these online classes, Gravity and Grace is phenomenal. And so just to be able to have online classes and to be able to have a DVD that you can just, you know, in the middle of the day, if you only have a half an hour, or in the morning or in the evening, to be able to go in and do that and to be able to feel into that, it's something that I have really enjoyed. And thank you for bringing the giving access to the listeners for free 30 days of yoga. Like that's wonderful gift. So
you're welcome.
Thank you for that. And I am so grateful that you have listened here today. I am running my Shamangelic Healing Center here in Sedona. You can always find me at shamangelichealing.com. And as a special gift for tuning in today, I would love to offer 20% off on my meditation course. So that way, with the breathing techniques, you can really kind of dive into how meditation can help accelerate your yoga practice. And so there's going to be a coupon, a discount for 20% off that, and 20% off on the Vibrant Nutrition course, which is all about a healthy lifestyle and vitality, which yoga and breathing is and meditation is all a big part of that. And so we want to give you that today as well. And as always, I appreciate you, Peter. It's just been such a blessing, and to be able to watch you grow and to watch you and Tani grow together, who's a dear, sweet sister of mine, and Athena as well, your daughter. Just, I can only imagine what is coming from a little beautiful soul like her that is raised by two such conscious parents. And I'm so grateful for your message, your wisdom, and your devotion to this mission. And thank you for going to the Pentagon. Thank you for going to the White House. Thank you for going to other countries to bring this, and for training wonderful yoga teachers so that we have more of those.
Thank you.
Out sharing this
It's
message.
been a blessing being here.
Yeah. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, we love and appreciate and value your time. Please like and share this podcast and let other people know about it. Please give us a rave review. There was some beautiful pearls here, and we want this message to get out to the masses. So please share it with others that you think will benefit. And may you have an incredible day, and I hope that you really take some of these beautiful pearls and begin your yoga practice or deepen it. So blessings to you, bowing to the yoga wisdom that is in each of us. Namaste.